when I'm in jail for that case, and he out there living a mafia lifestyle, giving me no money, giving me no respect, giving me no tribute, rolling with my road dog who was there when I got shot. I mean, come on, man. I'm not paranoid. I'm not paranoid.
Nah.
So you comparing that to Pac?
What?
But y'all live Pac life.
Okay.
Y'all tripped on some who wasn't even who was trying to show y'all respect.
Yeah.
I remember where I was when Tupac got. I was in Salinas Valley, 180 level 4, and I remember when the officer came and told me, he said, your homeboy's Tupac. I don't even know what to say.
But the feds had plenty to say on Wednesday, announcing a wide-ranging RICO-style investigation, including multiple arrests of members of the Rollin' 60s neighborhood Crips, of which Henley was described as a leader.
So Big U has officially been arrested and hit with RICO charges. And if you know anything about how that usually plays out, it's not looking good. Now here's where things get even deeper, because a lot of fans are bringing up how Tupac actually warned us about people like Big U long before all this went down. See, back in the day, Pac wasn't just rapping about street life or beefs. He was trying to pull the curtain back on what was really happening behind the scenes in the music industry. He called out the shady politics, the fake friendships, and most importantly, the way certain street figures were being used to control artists through intimidation and extortion. In fact, Tupac himself was extorted for years, but that only came to light after the FBI released top-secret files detailing how Pac was targeted by some very powerful and dangerous players.
According to documents from FBI records, the Vault, a radical extremist group called Jewish Defense League, was suspected of extorting and sending death threats to popular rappers Tupac Shakur and Eazy-E shortly before their deaths in the 1990s.
And when you look at Big U's history, from his time in the streets to working closely with death row affiliates to now being arrested under a RICO case, a lot of what Tupac said suddenly makes way more sense. There's even this old tape floating around where Pac talks about how rappers were being pressured and manipulated by these dudes who had ties to both the streets and the executives. There's a lot to unpack here, so let's break it all down. From Tupac's warnings to Big U's rise in the industry to his alleged connection to the same people who extorted Pac, because at this point, it's not just about Big U. It's about everything Pac tried to expose before he was silenced. Let's get into it.
I mean,
What it is that the East Coast dealers got the niggas under extortion. I came and everything. Because I dissed the Daily News. They put a hit out on me. When they tried to rob me, which is all they wanted to do, I knew what they told me.
So let's rewind to the mid-90s when Tupac was everywhere, dropping hit after hit, but also speaking out in ways that made a lot of people uncomfortable. Pac wasn't afraid to call out the music industry, the gang culture, and the whole rotten system.
America is the biggest gang in the world. You know what I mean? Look at how they didn't agree with Cuba, so what was the cut them off? That's what we do in the street. We block things off. I want to say stop the violence. I want to say the violence ain't good. And
why can't you say that then?
Because that's not realistic. I know it's not good. If anybody speak up against violence, it'll be the brother that got shot 5 times.
Tupac also talked about how artists were being extorted by people behind the scenes. And while he didn't drop specific names, the way he describes it sounds like he's talking about dudes like Big U. Pac said there were street guys being brought in to apply the pressure, shake down rappers, and keep them in line. Some were doing it for money, others were just trying to stay connected to the fame machine. And remember, Tupac was around death row. He saw all this up close and personal. He knew who was pulling the strings and who was being used to keep people scared and under control. And even though Pac was protected in some ways, he was not dumb. He knew that once you start speaking too loud or stepping out of line, the industry and the streets tied to it would come for you.
I'm not worried about it. You know, they miss. I'm not worried about it unless they come back.
Following this first shooting, Tupac told award-winning journalist AJ Benza, who was at the rapper's hospital bed afterward, that he was going to die young. Tupac said, "Not this time, but it's coming."
What makes this also chilling is that now, with Big U actually getting arrested and charged under a RICO indictment, it's like everything Tupac warned us about is finally coming to the surface. And fans who've been paying attention are starting to realize maybe Tupac wasn't just paranoid. Maybe he really was trying to save lives. Now, as for Big U, in their indictment, the feds compared his Big U enterprise to a mafia-like organization that relied on his stature and long-standing association with the Rollin' 60s and other street gangs to intimidate businesses and individuals individuals in LA. And this mafia-like organization has been operating for decades, going back to when Tupac was still alive. Big U is a known OG from the Rollin' 60s Crips, one of the most powerful sets in Los Angeles. In the 90s, that gang influence overlapped heavily with the rap scene, especially on the West Coast. And while Death Row Records was more tied to the Bloods, specifically the Mob Piru set, which Suge Knight was associated with, there was still crossover and mutual dealings with Crip affiliates like Big U, especially when it came to muscle, protection, or persuasion. Big U was known to have deep ties in the LA streets, and guys like him were often used to keep artists in check, intimidate rivals, or handle street-level business that labels didn't want their names on. But that's not all. There have been long-standing rumors that Big U was connected to behind-the-scenes moves involving extortion, artist control, and disputes tied to the Death Row era. He's been named in several documentaries and interviews as someone whose presence was felt during that time, even if he wasn't officially on payroll. In fact, Big U claimed in his interview on Vlad TV a few years back that there wouldn't have been Death Row if he hadn't gone to prison. Basically, he believed his absence from the streets created a power vacuum that allowed other people like Suge Knight to rise and take control of the LA rap scene in the early 90s.
You get out of prison, and then you start getting involved in the music industry.
Mm-hmm.
And Corrupt was the first artist that you started working with?
Corrupt, I was messing with in 1990.
Yeah, so that was the first artist?
First artist, Corrupt was the first artist.
Was he affiliated with Death Row yet or no?
No, it wasn't no Death Row.
Okay.
It probably would never even been a Death Row if I'd have been home.
Okay.
Fact.
Now here's where it gets even deeper. Tupac reportedly had issues with members of the Rollin' 60s Crips, and in 1993, he and Tretch got into a fight with some Crips at a comedy club in LA. This was during a time when tensions were running high between Death Row, which had ties to the Bloods, and various Crip sets, including the Rollin' 60s. Suge Knight's close connection to the Mob Piru Bloods added to that tension, and because Tupac was rolling with Death Row heavily, he was pulled into the gang politics, whether he wanted to be or not.
So when the Rollin' 60s came in, they came in deep. And what they did, they came in first and they just started picking up chairs and bottles and all the rest of that. We heard a commotion in the back and like, it wasn't really too much of nothing because we, you know, it could be fights anywhere, whatever. Before we got a chance to look back, like, pow, I got hit in the head with a chair. But it was so, you know, real, we had got green lit out there by the 60s. So that's, a green light is like on site, niggas is going roll on you and handle business. It's like a hit. So I had to get up with my family that was out there.
And get this, when Tupac was murdered in 1996, Big U said the police actually thought his men were behind the hit, which he denied.
Yeah.
I remember where I was in Tupac. I was in Salinas Valley, 180 level 4. And I remember when the officer came and told me, he said, your homeboy's Tupac. I'm like, my homeboy's killed Tupac. What you mean? But the only thing he could correlate is said whoever Tupac had S hats on. And they got into with these dudes and they saw it automatically in LA, that gold S hat, the Seattle Mariner hat, meant the homies. And I called the homies, like, man, and I had a cell phone at the time. Like, man, we ain't had nothing to do with that. That was woo, you know what I mean, whatever happened.
Yeah.
So I'm like, oh, all right. And but that was the first time I heard when Tupac had got killed.
Did you hear the Keefe D confession?
Mm-mm.
You didn't hear Keefe D?
Is that the bodyguard?
No, Keefe D was Orlando Anderson's uncle.
What, he confessed to kill?
Well, he confessed that Orlando Tupac.
Oh.
You want to hear it?
No.
Now, as for Tupac's relationship with the streets, it was always complicated. But what most people don't realize is just how much Tupac was paying attention to the shady business in the industry, especially when it came to people like Big U. In fact, many believe that Tupac saw what was going on behind the scenes with Suge Knight and Big U, and he tried to warn those closest to him about the dangers that lay ahead. Before his tragic death, Tupac had a lot on his mind and had already been involved in the music industry long enough to understand how deeply corrupt it could be. At the time, Suge Knight was controlling controlling death row records with an iron fist. And while Tupac was caught up in it all, it seems like he started waking up to the fact that there were a lot of dangerous players in the mix. Reports have surfaced over the years claiming Tupac saw through the facade that Suge Knight and Big U were putting on. Tupac was allegedly growing more and more disillusioned with the gang ties and underworld dealings that death row was connected to, especially as he got closer to Big U. He had always been outspoken about the way the industry used and exploited artists, and as his awareness of the darker side of things grew, he reportedly started warning people in his inner circle about Big U and his connections to Suge. Now, as for the connection between Suge and Big U, in Big U's recent RICO indictment, Suge's name was brought up, with reports claiming that Suge had been funding Big U's operation since his release from prison in 2004. Investigators even claimed that Big U modeled part of his operation on the business practices Suge used at death row. And this is a connection Tupac allegedly saw firsthand, and it made him want to pull back from the street politics and criminal activities surrounding him. In fact, Tupac had even hinted at his desire to leave the music business and focus on acting. In one of his final interviews, Tupac expressed a wish to leave the chaos of the music world behind and concentrate on his film career, where he felt he could have a more meaningful impact.
So I got, but after 2, I got to go get some new material.
So you're gonna do a romantic comedy anytime soon? Are we gonna see Tupac serenading a girl?
No doubt. Working on my little production company, a movie production company. We got a lot of good things happening. So I'm just, if I say it right now, the way my luck has been going, it'll all fall through. But if I said it, you go, oh, that's really nice. But just give me a month, just so I can lock it down. Then I tell everybody. But it's good stuff. I just want to push the envelope and work. I want to move further away from the music and go start waning myself into the acting more.
But sadly, Tupac never got that chance. His life was tragically cut short before he could make that transition. But many believe his desire to leave the industry was driven by his growing understanding of just how deep the corruption and violence ran, especially with figures like Suge Knight and Big U in the picture. And now with Big U facing legal charges and a growing spotlight on his connections to Suge Knight, it feels like Tupac's warnings are ringing truer than ever. But let's hear your thoughts on all this. Do you think Tupac really saw the danger surrounding people like Big U and tried to distance himself from that world? Or was it just a coincidence that he wanted to leave the music business and pursue acting? And what do you think of Big U's recent arrest? And how deep do you think the ties to Suge Knight really go? Drop your thoughts below and stay tuned for this next video.